All right, the black man who is leading the Disney district, appointed by Ron DeSantis, who used to run the Orlando Urban League, has resigned his position from the Florida Ethics Commission. Glen Gilzine was actually chairman of the Ethics Committee, but then he got the appointment to run the district that oversees Disney. Well, you can't hold two positions at one time, so therefore he's resigned. Go to my iPad. This is who Glen Gilzine is, the brother right there. The district position pays $400,000 a year. He used to run the Orlando Urban League, and one of the first things that he did as chair of the Disney district was get rid of DEI and also changed in terms of contracting that happened there. Michael, this guy's been called an Uncle Tom. He's been called a turncoat. He's been blasted by a lot of different people because he praised Disney's DEI efforts when he ran the Urban League. Now he's carrying the water of Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, you know, this incident right here is the first I've heard about this, and I don't know his whole background.
Well, we covered this last week, and the guy was spent 7 years covering the Orlando, says CEO of the Orlando Urban League, and again has praised diversity, equity, inclusion in the past, but then when he gets his $400,000 job, one of the first things he does is they stop any DEI efforts, and then they even even change contracting rules, saying that Disney, they were awarding contracts to minorities and giving preferences, and that's not how we're going to do business. So it's kind of like, everything you were doing at the Urban League, now you want to do the opposite.
Exactly. And people like this, you know, I know when we dealt with the story of the sister who's the executive administrative assistant to the DA there in Florida, who Ron DeSantis removed, and they talked about the black judge who said all the right things to get the votes and then turned his back on the African American community. So this seems like the same thing. Okay, he said the right things when he was being paid by the Urban League and had the job. Now he's turning his back on the African American community and harming us by removing DEI. Even though diversity, equity, and inclusion is not all that most people want it to be, that does not mean you get rid of it. Improve it, make it better. So once again, this is another example of how elections have consequences, okay? And we need to check the backgrounds of these people as well, regardless of race or ethnicity. We need to hold them all to the same standard.
Well, it's hilarious looking at this. This was a statement they put out here, Kelly, where he talked about, again, we discussed this last week, they were awarding, go to my iPad, they were awarding contracts, on race-based, setting quotas and things along those lines. And now this guy's sitting here trying to, and here's what's so crazy here. They put out a statement. He goes, this so-called diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives were advanced during the tenure of the previous board, and they were illegal and simply un-American. And then he says, as the former head of the Central Florida Urban League, a civil rights organization, I can say definitively that our community thrives only when we work together despite our differences. Like, dude, stop it. You're a suck-up to Ron DeSantis. And frankly, you are a traitor to the efforts that you actually led beforehand, which was fighting for inclusion of black people and economic inclusion.
For sure. And I know one thing, the people at the Urban League in Central Florida are very much of the mindset that we don't know him no more. Because that is so against everything that the Urban League stands for. Now, I can see, I'm not going to say I understand per se, but we have plenty of examples of people who have grassroots experience, so to speak, in making sure that things are more progressive and making sure that people have equitable opportunity in this country. And then once they get to where they want to go, all of a sudden everything is, upside down, flipped inside out as far as the progress that was made. It does not surprise me that money all of a sudden makes you think that your black skin is irrelevant. And that seems to be the case here. And he will be sadly mistaken soon come, because DeSantis does not care. He does not care.
Well, you know what? Again, so he's resigned from the Ethics Commission, Matt. And look, as we talk about all the time, as Michael said, all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Yeah, you're right. And as we talk about all this time on the show, it's about power. So Kelly's last point, this cat saw an opportunity to come up by now, decrying the same efforts that he championed at the Urban League. And, it's funny on one level that there are people who are easily bought and sold, but it's also scary because it shows you that you sometimes have sheets or wolves in sheep's clothing who are in organizations purportedly doing such important work. And in the moment they get out and it's advantageous for them to flip, they go in a different direction. Cats like this, you can't forget, right? Because we can't trust you now. We know that you're going to flip-flop, especially with somebody like DeSantis. We're not talking about another politician where, maybe some of their comments are on the line. This person is specifically and particularly attacking things like Black history, the history of your own people in that state. So for you to have a job like this with the Urban League and then get out and now be decrying those same efforts, I mean, we can't ever trust anything you say going forward. And it's about power, and it's sad, but he's obviously corrupted by the opportunity to have it.
Indeed, indeed. All right, y'all, quick break. We come back. We're talking 60th anniversary of the March in Washington.
Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It's Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. So that segment from Roland Martin Unfiltered that you just saw, where we talked about Glen Gilzean Jr. In Florida, was from Friday, August 25th, 2023. And he is the district administrator for the new Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. And he was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis. So on that Friday, August 25th show, I wasn't familiar with the story. That wasn't one of the topics that was on our list to discuss that day. But since then, I've done some research on Glen Gilzean Jr. And it's very, very interesting what I found out about him. Okay, so I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about that. Here is the article from Roland Martin Unfiltered that Roland discussed. He showed you this article. This is from the Orlando Sentinel. Okay, the Orlando Sentinel. And the name of this article is DeSantis Disney chief Glen Gilzine resigns from Ethics Commission. So that was he was the chair of the Florida Commission of Ethics. Okay, here's a picture of him. You see him with the beard. There's also another picture of him in another article without a beard. So this article talks about he resigned on Tuesday. Now, this article is from August 22nd, 2023. Okay, August 22nd, 2023. It talks about how he resigned Tuesday as chair of Florida's Ethics Commission so he can keep his $400,000 a year job leading Governor Ron DeSantis' Disney World Oversight Project. Okay, so you can read this article. It's not a really good one, okay, compared to what I found out about him. So check this article out. Now, the one that I'm going to spend the majority of the time discussing is from August 3rd, 2023, from the Tallahassee Democrat. Okay, the Tallahassee Democrat. The name of this article is Who is Glen Gilzean Jr., DeSantis' go-to guy for African-American history and Disney District. Okay, DeSantis' go-to guy for African-American history and Disney District. Because something very interesting about him, he is also the chair of the state of Florida's African-American History Task Force. Okay, he's the chair of the state of Florida's African-American History Task Force, and he also supports the new social studies standards coming out of Florida. And he has defended these social studies standards, including them saying that in some cases, enslaved Africans gain skills that they could use to their benefit. We're going to talk about that. Okay, some very disturbing things about him. Okay, so if we look at this article here from August 3rd, 2023 by C.A. Bridges for the Tallahassee Democrat, which is part of the USA Today network, he says that Glen Gilzean Jr. is an important person in Governor Ron DeSantis' Florida and a busy one. Okay, so for nearly 8 years, he was the president and CEO of the Central Florida Urban League, the Central Florida Urban League, which is an affiliate of the National Urban League. Now, the National Urban League President Mark Morial has blasted him for his comments when it comes to dismantling DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, and we'll go to I'll show you Mark Morial's comments also. All right, now, and Mark Morial is the president and CEO of the National Urban League. Okay, now in 2019, Governor Ron DeSantis appointed Glen Gilzean Jr. to chair the Florida Commission of Ethics. In 2020, he was appointed to the state of Florida's 2020 census statewide complete count committee, and later the reopened Florida task force after the COVID-19 lockdowns. He's also the chair of the state's African American History Task Force. There's a link there that you can read more information about the task force. Now this task force was not the work group that put together the social studies standards, even though he supports these new social studies standards coming out of Florida. In May of 2023, he was elected to be the district administrator of the new Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which was put in place to replace Disney's previous district as part of the governor's ongoing feud with Disney. We've all heard about that. Okay, now he is currently under fire for at least two of these positions, holding the Florida chair of the Florida Commission of Ethics, and also being the heading up the district and being the district administrator for the new Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. That's a position that pays $400,000. He resigned as chair of the Florida Commission of Ethics. Okay. Now he has defended the African American History Task Force for Florida's new controversial African American history standards against claims that they whitewash history. Okay, he has defended Governor Ron DeSantis and the African American History Task Force for Florida's new controversial African American history standards against claims that they whitewash history and require instruction that, quote unquote, slaves develop skills, end quote, for their personal benefit, Now, after he announced, and you know, we've talked about that extensively here on the African History Network show as well. And there's a couple articles I'll show you dealing with that, those topics. Now, after he announced that the new district governing Disney World would be abolishing diversity, equity, and inclusion, its diversity, equity, and inclusion program, his former employer, the Central Florida Urban League, blasted his betrayal. His former employer, the Central Florida Urban League, blasted his betrayal. This is something that we discussed on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And when he made the announcement that they were doing away with the DEI program, he name dropped the Central Florida Urban League to somehow give him some type of credibility. Okay, here's another picture of him. All right. We'll talk about his statement here in just a minute. Okay, now they give some background information on him as well. His grandparents immigrated from Jamaica. He grew up in the Lauderdale Lakes area of Broward County. He's 40 years old, holds a bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences from the University of South Florida and a master's degree in entrepreneurship from the University of South Florida Center for Entrepreneurship. All right, now, after college, Glen Gilzine worked for U.S. Senator Mel Martinez, Republican from Florida, and then spent 3.5 years working for the Florida Department of Education as a regional field director.
He left to form a nonprofit group called Educate Today and grew it into a multi-million-dollar organization, but resigned from it in 2012 when then Governor Rick Scott, who is now a U.S. Senator from Florida, appointed Gilzine to fill an empty seat on the Pinellas County School Board. And even though he had only lived in the area, for 2 months at the time. All right, now, he was defeated in the next election despite the endorsement from former Governor Jeb Bush, who's a Republican. But the next year, Governor Rick Scott appointed him to the Florida A&M University Board of Trustees, which is an HBCU, which was also considered by some to be a controversial choice to put him on the Board of Trustees of this HBCU. But Governor Rick Scott is a Republican as well. Okay. Now, in November 2015, he took over as head of Central Florida Urban League. Okay. The Central Florida Urban League, which is an affiliate of the National Urban League, which is a legacy civil rights organization, one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the country. At this point in time, the Central Florida Urban League was under a $1.2 million debt, and he brought them out of this $1.2 million debt in less than 2 years. He was made president and CEO of the Central Florida Urban League in 2016 and was named one of Central Florida CEOs of the year in 2019 by the Orlando Business Journal. Okay, by the Orlando Business Journal. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis is going to appoint him to multiple Florida committees. In 2019, DeSantis appointed Gilzine to the Florida Commission of Ethics and reappointed him in 2022. Now, Glen Gilzean Jr. has been criticized for conservative leanings. Now, I haven't seen anything saying he's a registered Republican, but he's in bed with a bunch of Republicans, and his policies lean very conservative. Gilzine has worked tirelessly his entire career to further opportunities for Black people, this article says. It goes on to say, quote, Glen was like a breath of fresh air to the Central Florida Urban League. And this is a statement by board chair Paula Hosington. She told this to the Orlando Sentinel. She said it was his love for community, his love for children, his love for just wanting to make it an even playing field for all of those that were needing a hand up or not a handout. Okay, for all those needing a hand up, not a handout. Quote, the way we are doing that is now through the 3 E's: education, employment, and entrepreneurship. Glen Gilzine told the Agents of Innovation podcast in 2020. Education, employment, and entrepreneurship. We believe the 3 E's will really eradicate generational poverty. So in 2020, he testified to the Presidential Commission of Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice on community engagement in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Okay, so George Floyd murdered May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis, Minnesota. All right, so in 2020, he testified to the Presidential Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice on community engagement in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Here's something that I found very disturbing about him. He stressed the importance of respect for law enforcement. Okay, now the respect for law enforcement should be a two-way street. It should be mutual. Okay. But I can understand, okay, you want to have respect for law enforcement, but we need to call out when law enforcement disrespects us. Okay. He stressed the importance of respect for law enforcement, something the Central Florida Urban League works toward with various community engagement programs like Coffee with a Cop. He blamed, now this is what was really disturbing here. He blamed young people's skepticism of law enforcement on, quote, nefarious influences in the media and in the community, end quote. Nefarious influences in the media and the community, with barely a mention of widespread law enforcement disrespect, violence, and the higher rates of killing of African Americans. Now that's very disturbing about him, because there are approximately 800,000 police officers and law enforcement officers across the country, 18,500 police departments. There is documented evidence of widespread law enforcement disrespect, violence. African Americans are killed at unarmed, are killed at a rate almost 4 times that of white Americans. Okay. Now, this is not saying all police, but there is documented reasons for concern. Okay. Now, I also think with there being a nationwide shortage of police officers, more African Americans who have the right type of mindset, the guardian mentality, as opposed to the warrior mentality, more of us need to apply and get these police positions. Okay. So we can become the type of officers we say we want to see, and not brutalize our people, not brutalize anybody, but especially our own people. Treat our people to say that the way we say we want police officers to treat us. There's a golden opportunity to take advantage of the fact there's a nationwide shortage of police officers. Okay, now Gilzean also endorsed a decision by DeSantis and Educator Commissioner Richard Corcoran to open classrooms in 2020 as COVID continued to surge in Florida, pointing out the number of Black-owned businesses that had closed due to lockdowns. All right. So then we have this right here. After Gilzean wrote a Black History Month editorial for the Orlando Sentinel in February of 2023, supporting the state's attack on the advanced placement African American history course offered to high school students, which Florida ultimately refused to use despite its popularity, National Urban League President Mark Morial wrote a letter to the editor denouncing the curriculum. Okay. Gilzean's view, quote, does not reflect denouncing Gilzean's editorial, I should say. Gilzean's view does not reflect the position of the National Urban League or the Urban League affiliate network, end quote, about Governor Ron DeSantis, quote, blatantly political effort to ban advanced placement, AP African American history, and weaponizing white grievance. Mark Morial, president and CEO of the National Urban League, wrote. He went on to say DeSantis is flagrantly exploiting racial fears and perpetuating a warped view of the nation's history, effectively thwarting efforts to end systemic racism. So Glen Gilzean has been blasted by the National Urban League. Now, Gilzean has been a fellow or member at 2 conservative institutions, the James Madison Institute and the American Enterprise Institute Leadership Network. let's see here. Okay. Now he's under fire for Florida's Black History curriculum and the Disney Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. Now, most recently, Gilzine has received high-profile blowback in his role in two major Governor Ron DeSantis policies. The Florida Board of Education was tasked to write a new African-American history curriculum in 2022, last year in 2022, as it conflicted with the state's new Stop Woke Act, which prohibited any teaching that could make students feel they bear personal responsibility, guilt or anguish, or, quote, other forms of psychological distress, end quote, for their race. Blocked instruction that suggested anyone was, quote, either privileged or oppressed. They don't want to deal with the facts and the history, based on race or skin color, required discussions about race to be taught in an objective manner, and banned any discussion, quote, used to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view, end quote. Now, Florida has been required to teach Black history since 1994, when the state legislature created the African American History Task Force. And this was behind the revelation of the Rosewood Massacre. Okay, when all this really came out about Rosewood, I think that was the impetus for this. All right, and we discussed this when I interviewed Dr. Chike Akua back on August 20th, 2023. Okay, dealing with what's going on in Florida. He's an educator and teaches at Clark Atlanta University. The task force was abruptly beefed up with Governor Ron DeSantis' allies in June of 2023, with Glen Gilzine as chief of this task force. The new task force, the new curriculum was created by a different African American History Standards work group. Okay, so the 2023 Social Studies Standards that so many people are complaining about was not created by the African American History Task Force. It's created by the African American History Standards work group. Okay, but that work group is largely made up of conservative appointees, African American conservative appointees, and was unanimously approved by the Board of Education, despite protests and criticism from major Black advocate groups, community leaders, Black Greek letter fraternity and sororities, and the state's teachers union. Okay, among the complaints were that the curriculum taught benefits of slavery to the enslaved, suggested that the actions of victims of historical Black massacres contributed to the events, named significant abolitionist and landmark court decisions in favor of civil rights, but not Florida's role in resisting these civil rights decisions, these court decisions and civil rights, and showcase almost exclusively Republican leaders in the civil rights movement. Okay, so it was very, very distorted. So in May, Glen Gilzine was elected district administrator for the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Now, this is a board that Governor Ron DeSantis has established to replace the one that Disney World has used to govern its roads, construct permits, fire protection, water and waste collection, and other infrastructure needs across 25,000 acres of property in Orange and Osceola counties since 1967. Now, the week of August 3rd, 2023, Glen Gilzine announced that the new district, okay, this new Central Florida, Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, was abolishing its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which is something that Governor Ron DeSantis has long railed and signed legislation against. He's against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And when Glen Gilzine made this announcement that he was abolishing the DEI programs, he name dropped his previous employer, the Central Florida Urban League, to somehow give him some type of credibility, okay? Somehow justify what he was doing. He said, quote, "Our district will no longer participate in any attempt. Our district will no longer participate in any attempt to divide us by race or advance the notion that we are not equal," end quote. He said this Tuesday, that week of August 3rd. He went on to say, "As the former head of the Central Florida Urban League, okay, a civil rights organization, I can say definitely that our community thrives only when we work together despite our differences." Okay, so he name drops the Central Florida Urban League somehow to justify dismantling the diversity, equity, and inclusion program. The National Urban League fired back. They're furious at what he said and what he did. The National Urban League, and quote, "The National Urban League and our nationwide movement of more than 90 local affiliates are shocked and dismayed by Glen Gilzine's betrayal of the values at the very core of our mission," said Mark Morial, the president and CEO of the National Urban League. He said this in a statement to the USA Today Network of Florida. Quote, "His rejection of diversity, equity, and inclusion principles is a rejection of the Urban League movement and the pursuit of racial justice itself. We vigorously and emphatically reject any implied association with Mr. Gilzine's current words or actions. His crass political expediency is all the more offensive given his previous vantage point to the harm he knows it will cause," end quote. So it appears he sold out African Americans for a $400,000 a year job. And this contradicts the work that he was doing apparently at the Central Florida Urban League. Read this article. Who is Glen Gilzean Jr., DeSantis' go-to guy for African American history and Disney District? There's also another piece from also another article. This is from USA Today. I saw a number of different articles on this, but these are some of the best ones. This one here from USA Today. This is called "Shocked and Dismayed." Shocked and dismayed. Civil rights group blast DeSantis Disney District for eliminated DEI programs. Okay, shocked and dismayed. Zoom in on this here. Shocked and dismayed. Civil rights group blast DeSantis Disney District for eliminating DEI programs. This is from August 3rd, 2023. Then there was an article from Channel 6, clickorlando.com, Channel 6. Now, this one is from August 22nd, 2023. Okay. This is after he resigns from the Florida Ethics, as chair from the Florida Ethics Commission. You can read this article as well. The name of this one is Florida Ethics Commission Chair Resigns, Stays with Disney District Job. Glen Gilzine is administrator for Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Okay. And talks about his $400,000 job and all this. So you can read this one. This is a short article here. Okay. So you can read this one as well. Now, dealing with the African American standards, social studies standards, but here's an article dealing with, here's one from NBCnews.com. We talked about this extensively here on the African History Network show. New Florida standards teach students that some Black people benefited from slavery because it taught useful skills. Okay, so you read this article. This is from July 20th, 2023. And it's a 216-page document. Is actually right here. It has the link to the document in the article. I'll go over to it. Here we go. This is it right here. Florida's State Academic Standards Social Studies 2023. Okay, so if you just Google that, it comes up. This is the full 216-page document. You can read it. Florida's State Academic Standards Social Studies 2023. Okay, you can read that. And then lastly, this piece right here, this is a good one. This was from the Tampa Bay Times, picked up by Yahoo News.com. Name of this one, benefited from slavery. Critics say some of the state's examples were never even slaves. This is from July 22nd, 2023. Because the Florida Department of Education put out a statement from Dr. William Allen and Dr. Francis Presley, justifying Dr. Francis Presley Rice, justifying the statements saying that in some cases, some slaves benefited from skills they learned while enslaved. So the Florida Department of Education issued a statement offering 16 examples of historic figures it said fit that description. But these examples came from these two African-American PhDs, okay, supposedly. Alex Lanfranconi, a spokesperson for the Florida Department of Education, said the experts stand behind their examples. Dr. Francis Presley Rice, a co-founder of the Yoakum African American History Association and chairperson of the National Black Republican Association, provided the information to the department. Okay. But what they provided were 16 examples of African Americans that they claim gained skills while enslaved that they used later in life. But almost half of those examples were never slaves. This article goes through to break that down. Okay, so read this article here. Originally from the Tampa Bay Times. Benefited from slavery. Critics say some of the state's examples were never slaves. Okay, read that also. All right, so hopefully this adds more context to that story that we did on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You can research this yourself. All skin folk are not kinfolk. Elections have consequences. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics impacts every aspect of our lives. And even our economic empowerment. My degree is in business administration. I'm also a historian. I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years, managed African-American owned businesses. So you have a lot of people out here preaching economic empowerment as the answer, but they don't understand politics creates the environment for their economic empowerment, creates an environment for their businesses to operate within. Okay. Also, if you like this type of information, be sure to visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can register for the online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Scroll down the page as information about our radio show, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my social media platforms and Blog Talk Radio. Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I teach my flagship online history class. It's a 12-week online course. Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Ma'af, for understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. The course is on sale. It's more than half off. It's on sale only $60. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. I do a PowerPoint presentation with book references. There's 15 books every reference, 80 to 100 articles. We have video clips. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So even after the class is over with, even after the 12-week online course is over with, you still have full access. You can go back and watch it a year from now, 2 years from now. You can watch the entire course. The content is PG-13. You can use this with your family, use this with your children. We have some video clips here to give previews of the class also that you can watch and then register for the course. And then on Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We go through a look at history chronologically from 1800 to 1968, 1970. And we highlight Black resistance movements, and we see what leads to the Civil War taking place. We studied the Civil War, Reconstruction, 1865, 1877. Great Migration, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, and the Jim Crow era. Okay, to understand what happened to us after slavery ended, what were the laws and policies put in place to bring us to where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history, especially the last 500 years of history. Okay, so you can register for those classes at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Also, if you want to support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. And when you click right here, it takes you right to our QR code for Cash App. $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. And this helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, keep financing the African History Network. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Turn on live notifications so you know when we go live, and follow me on Instagram as well at Michael Imhotep on Instagram. All right, hopefully you learned a lot today. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Is your child struggling with reading, writing, learning loss, and a culturally irrelevant curriculum? Do you want your child to be outstanding at reading and writing and also take pride in their culture? Then you want Reading Revolution Online. Reading Revolution Online is a web-based reading support program. We serve scholars in grades K through 8, and through our innovative approach, we help them build reading confidence and cultural identity development, equipping them for success in school and life. They learn about Black heroes and sheroes through captioned videos, reading selections, and other activities. Reading Revolution Online is an experience for the whole family. Do it for the culture. Go to readingrevolution.org